Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this program is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it's coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock, New York, Channel 23 Educational Television. And we have such a guest here this week. This show has been running almost 20 years, and you are the first animal rehabilitator that we have had. And this is only your second visit. And we would have had her pet snake, but it just didn't work right. So we're going to promise that for the third visit. But now, can you start off by telling us your name and where you're at and what animals you specialize in?
My name is Casey Seleman. I work at Woodstock Animal Hospital. I live in Hunter. I currently specialize in small animals. I'm a veterinary assistant at Woodstock Animal Hospital. But I've worked with wildlife, exotics, really, you name it. I've probably worked with it, except for elephants. I've not worked with elephants yet.
Well, honey, if you haven't worked for elements, we're going to have to get this one taken care of.
Of course.
We can. If you were to try to work with elephants, where would you go now?
Probably the Bronx Zoo.
Really?
Yeah, probably the Bronx Zoo to start, and then maybe out west to where there's more kind of involved and big zoos out there. I am considering going back to school for a zoology degree as well as my license as a veterinary technician, because currently I'm a veterinary assistant. So I'd like to get my license, and I'd like to get a zoology degree, and then I'm able to work with, to be more involved with exotics than I have been. I've done, educational shows with them. I've cared for them. But I'd like to do more and get more involved in conservation and things like that, kind of making a difference in the world. And
You just said something that was really important. The kind of wildlife that you work with depends on where you are. It depends upon what's available.
Mm-hmm.
So what is available to you in January?
Not much, but believe it or not, birds of prey are really the ones that I get calls most about. A lot of and deer. But birds of prey kind of have a rough time in the winter. There's a concept that on the roads, especially at night with owls, with the glare of the road, the snow, owls tend to get hit in the road. They tend to fly in the road more often in the middle of winter. So those are calls that I get. They go to places, to the other rehabilitators that are more equipped than I am with, flight cages and things like that to be able to care for them. But I have been getting calls about them, and I'm at least able to assist in the way of transportation, which is very important because a lot of people don't know how to handle them safely because they are a lot stronger than they look. They're not chickens.
Well, and the wingspan is tremendous.
Tremendous. What my favorite thing about birds of prey, actually, one of my very first jobs that I ever had when I was 18 years old, I worked at a museum in Troy. The Children's Museum of Science and Technology is what it was called. And they had two owls there, Susie and Otis. Susie was a barred owl, which is native. They both were. Susie was a barred owl, native to New York, and Otis was a screech owl. And both of them had reasons as to why they couldn't be released back into the wild. Susie was missing a wing. Otis had, essentially, to put it simply, brain damage. And the coolest thing about working with them is you don't realize until you get to hold them how light they are. Susie was probably 1.5 feet tall, and she weighed maybe 2 pounds.
Really?
Absolutely, maybe 2 pounds. Their bones are hollow. Their feathers are very light and also hollow, as so they can glide through the air undetected by even, the most eat any mouse or rodent on the ground that's listening. They can fly absolutely undetected through the woods. So they're very light. So when you're holding them, it doesn't really feel like you're holding much.
And they were at a museum.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Were there other wild animals at this museum, or just these two?
We did wildlife programs at this museum. The other wild animals that were there, they had a program with exotics, with reptiles and amphibians and things like that. And there were certain native animals to New York, such as certain toads, snakes, such as a rat snake. But they really had a great big hatchery for native fish. They had trout, they had bass, catfish, different turtles, terrapins, and they had a beautiful, essentially, fish tank that went from, the fish that you'd see in the mountains, such as the trout, down to the fish that you'd see in the lake, such as the catfish and the bass. And then the fish and creatures that you would find in the brackish water, more towards the bay. That included the terrapins, which are saltwater terrapins. It's actually technically a type of turtle that lives most of its life in the water. The diamondback terrapin, they're very beautiful, beautiful turtles if you've never seen one. And horseshoe crabs, which you'll see down at the bay as well on the beaches. Just very interesting animals. And the way that it was set up so that you could walk down the path of the streams and the rivers was amazing. And it was very fun to help upkeep that and learn and teach people about the streams and rivers of New York and the waterways.
Did you have a goal in mind at that time, or was this just something that you thought was fun?
My goal since I was a kid was simply to work with animals. I remember my science teacher when I was in 7th grade asking us all what he thought we would do when we grew up. And he said 90% of the kids in his class, when he got back into contact with them when they were older, weren't doing what they said they were going to do in 7th grade. And what I said was, I want to work with animals. And he said, well, that's not what I meant. I meant a job. I was like, well, that's a job. I just want to work with animals. And lo and behold, that is exactly what I have done. I've worked with so many different types of animals in my life, and I aim to continue reaching out and doing different things and learning different things and having different jobs and seeing really how far I can go with how many species I work with and handle and can teach people about.
How did you, when you first decided to be a wildlife rehabilitator, what was your first step on that career path?
My first step on that career path was when I lived in Florida, and I worked with the Florida wildlife. I worked at a sanctuary in Florida. And alongside the wildlife that I worked with exotics as well, because in Florida, the pet trade is kind of out of control. People are illegally selling alligators and snakes and monkeys and foxes. And so the animals that I worked with, even though they were technically native to Florida, some of them, they were domesticated, but they were surrendered to sanctuaries because people don't realize that these are not pets. This is not going to act like a dog. A fox is not a dog. And people, if they have more people than you think, if they have the opportunity to purchase a fox, they do it. And it's not a good choice.
I met a gentleman several years ago here in Woodstock who had a pet fox. And the stories that he told about that fox were incredible, and they were hilarious. Now, they made good stories, but let me tell you, that fox gave him a run for his money.
I bet it did.
So what do you do? What about the kids that decide that they're gonna patch up a broken leg on a squirrel or something? Do you do that?
Me personally, now that I have the license to do it and I have the knowledge to do it, absolutely. Now, I would never suggest somebody if they find an animal in the wild with a known injury, I would never suggest that they try to fix it themselves unless they truly know what they're doing. And 99% of people do not. Patching up a broken leg on a squirrel is a lot more involved than you may think. And also the fact that squirrels bite really hard, very, very hard, and they do, and they will. So, if you find a squirrel with a broken leg that's allowing you to pick it up and work with it, chances are the broken leg is not the only issue, and
Right.
it's likely not the biggest issue. No squirrel in its right mind is going to allow that to happen. And the amount of things that could be going on that's causing the squirrel to be docile enough to let somebody pick it up and try to help it is astronomical. It could be anything. It could be sickness. It could be dehydration. It could be anything. Infection.
What happens in the Woodstock area? Do people try to feed the wild animals?
They do. They do.
Do you recommend that? What is the rehabilitator's philosophy on that?
I don't recommend feeding wild animals. And the reason, in the summertime, now before I say that, in the summertime, having a bird feeder is harmless. Taking it away in the beginning of fall is the way to go, because a lot of those birds are migratory. And if they have a constant source of food, they will not migrate. And a lot of these birds aren't really equipped to last the winter here. And that's why they migrate. So, having a feeder out to be able to watch the birds in the summertime is a lot of fun for you and your family. And it can bring a variety of different birds to your yard. But you also need to remember that if you're attracting birds, you're attracting squirrels, and you're attracting bears. Bears love some black oil sunflower seeds as much as your squirrels, and deer will also be attracted to them. And if you have those out all winter, deer will become dependent on you. Bear will also become dependent on the feeder, and then if they wind up knocking the feeder down, eating everything in that, and they're still hungry, they're in the area, your garbage can is right there, that's when they start getting into people's garbage, and then you're cooking dinner, and then your kitchen door is right there, and that's when they start getting into people's houses. And when it comes to deer, a deer that's just wandering into the area for a day, they can actually they can become very sick by eating such rich foods in the middle of wintertime. Their metabolisms slow down significantly to allow them to essentially survive on little more than bark. They strip the bark off trees, they dig in the snow for whatever grass might be left, and that's all they have. So if all of a sudden, out of the blue, a deer that's passing through sees a feeder full of black oil sunflower seeds or corn, and they eat that can make them very, very sick. With their metabolisms being as slow and resourceful as they are at the time, they could actually wind up passing away from eating such rich foods in the middle of the winter time. So I really don't recommend feeding the wildlife. If you have a bird feeder that you can for sure keep out of the reach of the deer and bear in the summertime, sure, but take it back up in the fall.
After Labor Day.
Yeah, I would say as soon as it starts getting a little bit cold, as soon as the leaves begin to turn, and that'll also help with the deer and bear in the area as well.
Well, what about people who come into this area to live and don't really know about the wildlife that are here, what are some things that they need to know that you can share with them?
I'll say that every bear sighting does not mean that you need to call a rehabilitator or the police or animal control. Yes, they are big omnivorous animals that have big teeth, but they are much more afraid of you than you are of them, I guarantee. Stay away from them if you can. They are fun to watch. Watch them from inside your house if you can, or inside your car. Don't harass them, don't feed them. And then keep a very close eye if you see babies for the mom. And if they, actually, you had spoken to me about a bear in your backyard that you said was about the size of a Sheltie. And, a Shetland sheepdog, which if you see a bear that's about that size or larger, believe it or not, even at that small size, the bear can survive on its own and should be left alone and likely doesn't need help. If you see a fawn in your yard, the reason that it's not running away from you is because that's what it's supposed to do. It's laying and waiting for its mom to come get it. So as hard as it is, please don't touch them. The best thing you can do if you find a fawn in your backyard is to watch for the mom and make sure the mom does come back. If you don't see the mom within 24 hours, then call a rehabilitator. Still don't touch the baby if you can help it. Rehabilitators are unfortunately swamped with fawns in the fall or in the spring because people do see them in their yards and, they don't run away and they think there's something wrong with them, which I understand. I understand. But bringing it to a rehabilitator unfortunately takes a spot from an animal that could probably have really used that spot. They really become overwhelmed in the springtime when all the babies are coming in, and chances are, unless you really know something's wrong, if you see a baby animal in the wild, leave it alone. If you can keep an eye on it, good. If you know for a fact it's hurt, call a rehabilitator, but otherwise just leave it alone. That's probably your best bet.
Just to not touch it, not try to feed it, not whatever.
Exactly.
Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Do we have too many deer in our area, or do we just have too many people? Or is it okay?
There are a lot of deer in Woodstock. I don't think we have too many. I've seen places that have too many deer, and it becomes a huge, huge issue with the roads. Woodstock is not one of those places.
Oh, that's wonderful.
The deer that I see in Woodstock are the same deer that I've seen for the couple years that I've been here. The deer that come to the animal hospital are the same deer that have been there for a very long time. And it's cool to watch them have new babies each year, and those babies grow up and have babies, and they remain in the area, and they're not overpopulated in any respect, in my opinion. People, obviously, there are hunters out there that do help control the population, but I would think even without them, we'd be okay with the deer population. And a huge, huge thing, too, that has been controlling the deer population is the chronic wasting disease that struck the area within the past few years. It's a disease that is passed from deer to deer by the little gnat bugs that fly around in the summer that are so annoying. And unfortunately, the deer have very high fevers and seek out water and tend to pass near water. And hundreds of deer were lost in the past few years due to this disease. So by no means are we overpopulated, especially now.
Well, I realized when we first came here that I had never been that close because I lived in the DC metro area, which is a very intensely human place to be. But I have a garden, and there are deer who come through that garden every day. This is their turf.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for me to recognize that this is their turf. We are coexisting, you know.
Yeah.
So I've tried not to put up too many fences. I have tried not to cause problems.
Yeah.
Although I don't see how you can, I just don't see how.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the summertime when we have so many people walking around.
Oh, I know. And, you know, speaking of fences, that's a good thing to bring up is you know, as it is necessary for some people to put fences up in their yard, deer go the same path every day at the same time. That's, you know, why people will put up trail cameras in a certain spot and they will see the same deer over and over and over. That's why you see deer trails in the middle of the woods, because the deer go down that path. They've made that path for themselves, and that's the path that they follow every single day from the time that they're born to the time that they pass. And putting up fences and having houses built and roads built, you know, if a road is built through that path, the deer will continue to use that path. And that's when the danger becomes apparent, you know, because the deer are constantly crossing at that spot.
What about other animals? Are there any animals that are living in this part of the Hudson River Valley that are dangerous, that we should be afraid of? And why should we be afraid of them?
There's not a single animal in this area that you should have any fear for. Most of them are much more fearful of you than you could ever be to them. There's a lot of fear mongering in this area, especially coming from people who, believe it or not, have lived here for a long time, against coyotes. And you know, that coyotes will attack your dogs, attack you, lure. There's a myth that a coyote will lure your dog out to the woods so that the pack can attack your dog. These are just not true. Coyotes are dogs. There are studies and there are videos and research that shows that they will occasionally want to play with your larger dog. Of course, when it comes to smaller dogs and cats, that's where the danger does become apparent. However, in the case of Woodstock, there is a leash law. Your smaller dog should be on a leash. Or in your fenced-in backyard on your property. If you don't have a fence in your backyard on your property, your small dog should be supervised at all times, including your large dog as well. And I'm just one of those people that are, you know, unless you're supervising your cat, maybe don't let your cat outside in the middle of the wilderness, because yeah, they are a danger to your cats, but this is their home. It's their home, and cats are more of a danger to everything here than coyotes are. And those are really the ones that people fear the most. You know, you drive a little past Woodstock, and you see signs up saying coyotes in the area will kill your dogs. It's just not true. It's just not true. As long as you're keeping your dog on a leash and supervised, and it's not true. Foxes, you really don't have much to worry about with foxes unless you have chickens. Skunks, leave them alone. You know, I think that's just kind of the general rule here, is just leave them alone. There's nothing to fear.
Just not worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are there times of the year when people need to be more alert?
The springtime I would say because a lot of animals, bears included, are coming out of hibernation and they're hungry. They have babies and they're very protective. I think that would be, if anything were to happen, that would be the time to be on higher alert. But still understand that this is their home and these are their babies that they are protecting. As well as the fact that, you know, throughout the winter, they don't have much. And they are pretty close to starving by the end of the winter. And, you know, any animal, if they're starving, will take any opportunity for a quick meal. And, you know, we can't blame them for that, you know, that's not their fault. But I don't think that that's cause for fear, just awareness that they exist.
What is the danger? Because in our gardens, in this area, we see an awful lot of squirrels and chipmunks and larger birds. And what is the danger of these animals? Is there a danger? There is none.
Not. Absolutely not. If you're ever bitten by any animal, immediately contact your doctor and potentially the health department as well. If any animal does try to attack you, chances are it is not well. Not, you know, and there is also a myth that certain animals like skunks, coyotes, foxes, raccoons should not be out during the day. But again, in the springtime, they will take any opportunity to get food. So that can also be a myth. But if any animal like goes out of their way to attack you, that's the time that, yes, you should call animal control. Yes, you should call a wildlife rehabilitator, because that's not normal behavior for any animal in this area. Mm-hmm. If you are bit by an animal, contact a rehabilitator, contact the health department, and definitely go to the hospital. You know, as far as I know, there hasn't been a confirmed case of rabies in the area in several years. But that is always on the radar, always. And, you know, if you do get bit by an animal, make sure you can identify the animal, and then immediately go to the hospital. I believe the number one vector for rabies is bats. So especially if you get bit by a bat, it's very, very important to seek medical attention. But even still, with these statistics, that there's no fear of these animals.
Do we have a lot of bats in this area?
Yeah, we do. We don't see them very often, but we certainly do. And if you would like to see more bats, what you can do is install a bat box in your backyard. There's several blueprints online that you can create one yourself, and also you can purchase them. Having a bat box is extraordinarily beneficial, because a lot of the species of bats, such as the little brown bat, which is actually the name of the type of bat that we see here, they are endangered, and they're pollinators, believe it or not, as well as insectivores. So having bats in your backyard will help, you know, bring wildflowers to your garden, as well as reduce the amount of mosquitoes in your backyard.
So if you want to do something to help the wildlife in this area, getting yourself a bat box and putting it somewhere in your garden then is a real help.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, they're as important as bees. They do pollinate. Some bats drink nectar. So during the night they do fly, very similar to how a hummingbird does. They hover and they drink nectar from flowers, and they go from flower to flower just like bees, pollinating the flowers. And that makes strides in creating new wildflowers and new plants for the next season. They also keep a lot of, they do help keep a lot of invasive species under control, one of which is prevalent. I actually haven't seen one in this area, but I know they exist, and I have heard that they do exist in this area. It's called a spotted lanternfly. They're actually beautiful to look at, but they are invasive. I believe they are native to Asia, and they're simply not meant to be here. And bats are, if you do find that you have an issue with spotted lanternflies in your backyard, bats are the way to go with that, because they will help eat them, essentially. Very beautiful bugs, so it's kind of hard to get rid of them when you see them. And of course, helping keep mosquitoes and other pests under control in your backyard as well.
So taking care of or trying to protect the wildlife in this area is good. It's good for the planet.
Yes.
Yes. How does one become a wildlife rehabilitator?
Well, it's not that hard, actually. You just have to take a test. And it's a 3-hour test, and there's a very significant book that you need to study from, but just like any other test that you take, there's a lot of studying to do. I studied for 3 weeks, and there were still several questions that I honestly didn't even see in the booklet that I studied, but thankfully with my knowledge and history with wildlife, I happen to know them. But if you're not prepared, if you're not prepared physically, and if you're not prepared in your property and what you own and what you're able to do, there's really not much you can do. I own a property, and I have several places that I can actually keep an animal while still, if they're well enough, still having them outside in their natural environment. Even in the middle of winter, it can be detrimental to bring in an animal that's somewhat healthy and able to live outside, and should be living outside in the winter time at this time. So I do have the means to have animals outside, and it's also very important, since I have a farm and my own animals, to keep them separate from my own animals, and absolutely have zero contact with my own animals, because not only is there a concern for stress on the wildlife, there's always the concern for diseases. And as much as my dogs and cats and animals are vaccinated, you simply can't vaccinate against every disease. And diseases, as we know with COVID, mutate constantly. So we really never want our pets and wildlife to come in contact. So I have the ability to keep these things separated.
So what you're telling me is that a wildlife rehabilitator is a person who has an interest in animals and who likes to be hands-on with the animals, and who has a place to help rehabilitate them, and has time to take the test.
Mm-hmm.
And does it take a lot of cages and things you have a lot of cages?
Yeah, it does. It takes more supplies than you'd think. It takes a lot of cages. It takes a lot of towels and rags, bowls. You need to be very aware of each species' different nutritional requirements, and you need to meet them as exactly as possible. You need to know how to clean properly, and in doing so, eliminate the possibilities for any kind of transference of parasites, pathogens, things like that. So you need to know how to clean properly, which bleach doesn't cover at all. There are certain things that are only killed with boiling water. There are certain things that are only killed with vinegar, that are only killed with bleach. And also with birds are extraordinarily sensitive. So if you have a bird in your house, you can't have a wood stove. You can't be burning candles. You can't have any sort of incense, essential oils. Extremely sensitive to things like that. And then cleaning wise, the only thing you can use is a very diluted solution of vinegar, because that's the only thing that they're not extraordinarily sensitive to. And birds require quiet, dark spaces that are, they prefer to actually have some wind, and like kind of white noise, if you want to be really exact about your care with them, which I do. Depending on what the issue is, do you want the bird to be able to fly? Do you want the bird to have to perch while it's recovering? Do you need the bird to be essentially stagnant while it recovers so that it doesn't re-injure itself? Things like that are all things that you need to take into consideration when rehabilitating animals. And then the very, very specific needs of each species, mammals versus reptiles versus birds, and what you need to report to the DEC, record keeping, things like that. It's all very, very important. It's extremely involved, a lot more involved than people seem to think.
Do wildlife rehabilitators ever meet as a group? Do you ever have conventions or conferences or anything? Or
actually, yes, there was recently a wildlife conference in the city that I was unfortunately unable to go to. I was looking forward to going to it. It just, life happened and I wasn't able to, but I was, if I was able to go to it, they had a booth where you could get a rabies vaccination for yourself.
Oh, wow.
And in order to be a rabies vector rehabilitator, which is one of my goals, you need a rabies vaccination. And rabies vector species are raccoons, bats, and skunks, I believe. So to be able to rehabilitate those species in the state of New York, you need to be up to date on your rabies vaccination.
So when is the next conference? Do you know?
I don't currently know, but I will look into that. And if I'm able to make the next one, I will.
How did you find out about this conference?
I was going to be volunteering at a different wildlife rehabilitation facility that mainly worked with birds of prey. They, like I said in the beginning, I will transport, but I don't work with birds of prey as much because I just don't have the facilities for it. I don't have large outdoor flight cages, things like that. So, I was considering volunteering there, and so I went there and I met the people and I met the birds, and they were phenomenal. And actually, the woman that I was going to work with told me about it, but my schedule changed and I've just been working a lot, so I haven't quite been able to do that.
Yeah, life gets in the way.
It certainly does.
It
does.
has a way.
It has a way.
Well, can you get on a list? In other words, are you on a list now for future conventions, or is that you're going to have to just be really careful and watch what's going on?
I think that's what it is. I think I just kind of have to watch what's going on and see what I'm able to make.
Yeah,
I think it was an annual thing, so but that was just the one convention. There are others, and we have several surrounding states as well, so if I see one going on in a closer state, I'll go there.
That's true. If you don't make the New York one, you might make the Connecticut one, or you might make the Pennsylvania one, or whatever.
Exactly.
And it would be interesting. I'm imagining that it would be interesting because you would, the wildlife is different in the different locations.
Mm-hmm. And the laws are different as well. Just an example on that, Pennsylvania, their exotic laws are a lot more lax than the ones in New York. You are allowed to keep crazier animals, for lack of a better word. So there's a bit more to rehabilitation in Pennsylvania, because as a rehabilitator, there's the chance of people surrendering their exotics to you. there's always that chance here because people don't follow the law wherever they are. And of course, if someone were to surrender an exotic to me, entrust me with their animal, I would never, I would take their animal with trust that I would care for it and that they wouldn't get in trouble because they're doing the right thing. I would never, turn somebody in for something like that. But that's one of the things that people did a lot in Florida, and they trusted us with their animals that they loved. They really loved these animals. They just did not have the means to care for them because whoever gave them these animals did not tell them what they were in for. The one of the foxes that I worked with dug a hole in one day and made a den in the man's mattress. So it was a hole through the mattress, a tunnel, and then a whole den on the inside of the mattress. The mattress was trashed. I mean, it was completely, and they poop on things to mark their territory. They're simply not litter box trained or anything. Like, they're not.
Can they be litter box trained?
It is extremely hard, but I guess technically, yes, they can be. But they need an ability to make a den themselves. You can't make it for them. They need the ability to dig and tunnel and make a den themselves with their own, with whatever they choose to be as their bedding with, and they'll make it out of anything.
So the fox that trashed the mattress, what did the human do?
I'm not sure. I wasn't there when it happened, but he did surrender her to us.
So that's what he did.
Yeah.
And then he bought a new mattress, and she was with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when that happens, what do you do with that animal?
They essentially just live their life out in the sanctuary. So she had a huge outdoor enclosure with 2 other foxes, and she lived her life out in the sanctuary.
Was she happy in the sanctuary?
She was very happy.
Okay, so it was okay.
Yeah. Yep. While I worked there, I made it my duty to, with all the animals I worked with, to provide them with different enrichments daily. Enrichment can be something as for a fox as little as giving them an egg, so that they can crack it open themselves and they can lick out the inside or like a frozen egg, or a frozen piece of meat, so they can really work at it and chew at it. Or it could be as simple as a box sprayed with catnip or a carrot that has the stems on it. It's really easy, and the more variety you give into their life, the more they find interest and a spark in every new thing that you hand them. Well, she liked to play soccer with me. We had a little soccer ball. And we'd play
So you were at a sanctuary in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
What makes a sanctuary?
It's essentially just a place that is a safe landing area for animals that need help. It's a safe landing pad for animals that have nowhere else to go.
Well, does that mean you need a 500 acres or
You need a pretty good amount of space, yeah.
10, 50 by 50 feet, or
Yeah.
what makes a sanctuary?
Well, space and resources, to put it very, very.
So if somebody has a sanctuary, do we say that it's generally a group of people that have it's an organization, or it's
It's usually 1 or 2 people that own it, and a lot of the times they have volunteers come in and work with the animals. Typically, actually, the volunteers don't work directly with the animals, but the volunteers will come in and a good sanctuary has a system of, the animals go in here to feed, a door shuts, the volunteer is able to clean the area out here, the door opens, the volunteer, the animal comes over here, the volunteer cleans up the feeding area, and it's like a system like that is ideal for any sanctuary, especially when it comes to like a wildlife sanctuary. Like the animals that I worked with, most of them were domestic at one point. They were raised by people. That's the main reason they were never able to be released into the wild, and that's most of them. So I didn't have that. So the reason we couldn't have many volunteers is because they weren't able to walk into a fox enclosure and know what to do with animals that were at their feet. With a lot of people, it would be a lot of self-control not to pet it like a dog.
Right.
And they bite. And, if you went to pet Ava, for example, who was my favorite fox. I never have favorites, though. If you went to pet Ava, she'd bite you. That's how they play. That's how they communicate with each other. And, there is a way that I who established a very, very strong rapport and relationship with Ava was able to snuggle her. But, just your average person that doesn't know fox language, what they do prefer, what the individual animal prefers, would walk in there and walk out bleeding, likely. Not to say that there wasn't days that I walked out of there bleeding as well. And that's the danger of the profession, is you're going to get hurt. You don't know what they're thinking all the time. As much as you want to, you can't read their minds.
Well, I think working at a veterinary clinic, you're going to get bit.
I'm going to knock on wood. I haven't yet. And I've been a vet tech for almost 5 years. I've worked with dogs for, 9, 10. I've never gotten bit. Not once.
That's
I can't
wonderful.
believe it. I can't believe
That's
it.
wonderful.
Tomorrow is going to be the day because I just said that. Though.
I really never did get bit either, but there were people who did.
All the time.
Yes.
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. I do have to say that as I've worked with a lot of different animals, and having worked with wildlife, but one animal in particular, which was racehorses. I used to work with thoroughbred racehorses. And if you are not on your toes, you won't walk out of there alive with those animals. A lot of the time, they are extremely intense animals. And their play style, they like to, they were all young horses, and they were great animals, and I had a very, very close friendships with a lot of them. But they were quick, and they would get you if you weren't paying attention. And I did get kicked. And bit by horses. I never got bit by a dog. But I think that being on my toes for the years that I was around racehorses is what has saved me in the profession that I'm in today. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart. I can dodge anything. So, and also, working with wildlife and I can dodge anything.
Well, I have worked with horses, but not as a person who was taking care of the stall, and not as a person that was trying to feed them or, work or groom them or whatever. And so my communication with them was not as intense. Mm-hmm. And I really think sometimes that horses, because of the way humans connect with them and captivate them and work with them, gives them an edge.
Yeah.
Unless they really want to be in that situation.
They're not going to be.
Right.
And they know that.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Horses are fabulous. And they are so aware of their environment, I believe.
Absolutely. And they're very aware of how we and other horses feel.
Yes.
and they act accordingly often.
I think also that, and I haven't been around that many horses, and it's been a while, but I think they are aware of the climate.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I really had one horse in particular that spent some time with me, and I came away from there thinking, well, you know, I just got a lecture on being a responsible human being. Oh well, that's, you know, but if you're open to it, you have to be open to it. Somebody else might be standing next to that horse and never realize what was happening. And besides that, the horse wouldn't talk to him anyway. Right.
And that's, you know, that brings me into something else, is the language of animals. And if you want to make friends with any animal, learn their language first. And treat them like the animal that they are. They're not people. And they will never respond to you as a human being, no matter how much you try.
Right.
They will talk to you on their level and their level only. And people need to, you know, if you want to make a friend with an animal, you need to respect that.
Yes.
And it's very important for every single animal, and every animal has their own language. It's, I mean, from foxes to wolves to dogs, all canines, all with extremely different languages, as somebody who's worked with all of them.
Have you had experience with wolves?
Yes, I have.
Tell me about that.
So most of them were wolf dogs. This is at the same sanctuary as the foxes, actually. And they came to the sanctuary because people do the same. They get a wolf dog thinking, oh, wow, what a cool animal to have.
Right.
And then it's not a dog.
Right.
It's absolutely not a dog. Wolves have such intense language. And when talking to each other, they're so intense with each other that it's very hard with humans to cope with that.
Right.
People tend to see a lot of what they say as aggression, as anger, but it's not. It's just intensity and commitment to what they're saying, and just doing everything that they can to get that point across. Anything that they can to get that point across, be it positive or negative.
Right. Well, I also think that the wolf-dog hybrid, and I have never really worked with a wolf, but I have worked with wolf-dog hybrids. I've worked with the hybrids. They're smart.
Oh yeah.
You're looking this guy, you know, you're right there with this guy, and I realize that he is telling me that he's smarter than me. And not only that, he's convincing me, you know. And I'm gonna give you a fair shake, lady, but you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they have an interesting aroma.
Yeah, they do. They're a little stinky.
Well, I'm not going to say stinky, but they don't smell like a dog.
No, certainly not.
And their coat is very, very interesting.
It is. It almost, I don't know how to, like, I'm going to say this word, but it's not really what I mean, but oily?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It has
sheen?
Something.
A substance to it, yes.
Yes. That, and you're not going to find that in the dog.
No.
And I don't know whether you find it in the wolf or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when you find that aroma and you find that oil, whatever that is, that is the wolf part of the hybrid.
Yeah, with wolves that are pure, it's that substance with a little more plush to it.
Wow.
That's the best way I can put it. With the little, like, instead of as coarse as a wolf dog hybrid, it's coarse and plush.
That is really luscious.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
So now you know why people are really attracted to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a beauty in wolves that can't be matched. they've been so hated throughout humanity and hunted, and I couldn't imagine. If you ever looked a wolf in the eye and made friends with it, you'd never have a thought that they were an evil creature.
Oh no, I don't think they're evil at all.
Yeah, and so many people do. I mean, they're just kind of, honestly, they're portrayed poorly in the media as well.
I'm sorry that they have that problem. But there are a lot of animals that have that problem. They have an image issue. And it's not that the animal has the problem, it's the human.
We have the image issue.
Yeah. And the image, the human beings have a bias. Mm-hmm. And the thing I also find out that I found, in my opinion, of the wolf, when you take the genealogy of a wolf and you take the genealogy of a dog, I think the dog is older.
It's as somebody who's worked with both, it's very hard for me to believe that one came from the other. I agree. I think they have a similar, the same kind of link somewhere, but the dog didn't come from the wolf.
Right.
The wolf and the dog came from something else.
Right. Absolutely.
They're not even close.
Yes.
They're really not. And the language barrier is very comical to watch if you see a dog and a wolf try to meet. It's quite funny if you know what they're saying, and the dogs never make out very well because they're scared. Because the wolf is so intense.
Right.
And their language is sort of similar but just not the same. So there's that barrier there, but they think they can understand each other. It's very, very odd. It's very odd to watch.
Well, this intensity that we talk about, it's an intensity. You run across it, you see it in the animals, the wild animals. And it's kind of across the board.
Yeah. Don't
you think? I mean, there is maybe a physical strength. How would you define that intensity?
Honestly, survival. They have that just deep down need to survive and thrive, that they will do anything to do that. And dogs, just as an example, would rather live for us. A dog would rather we be happy than they be happy. And a wolf would never think of that, Right. Yeah, I'm gonna make this human happy no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Not in a wolf. But that makes the wolf, and that gives them a certain sense of humor.
They do have a sense of humor
and personality.
It is very, it is very interesting to watch an animal develop a sense of humor. A wild animal that meets a human, and you just know when they're laughing at you.
Oh God. That's okay. You just have to say, okay, I can be laughed at.
I laugh at myself too.
I'll take it. And I'll hold my head high, and I'll love you anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And hey, I've been laughed at by many, many animals. And it's okay. Because I got to be with that animal. And if you're going to laugh at me, it's okay. I still got to be with you.
I'll laugh with you.
Yeah. And I'll laugh at me too. And I'm not embarrassed at all. Do you think, now you and I have experienced this. Is this an experience that a lot of wild animal habilitators have, being laughed at?
I hope so.
I do too. But I'm not going to go, you can't go around asking them. I mean, I keep meeting these, oh my gosh, we have 2 minutes. Okay, listen, thank you so much, Ellen. She gave us 2 minutes. Listen, I want to have you come back. Can you come back?
Of course.
I'll
bring my snake this time.
Okay.
She'll shed, I will feed her, and then I'll come back, okay?
And about how long will that take?
Let's see. So she'll probably be finished shedding within the next week and a half. I will feed her, so I will be able to come back in 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, listen, everybody. We're going to see, what is the name of the snake?
Wilka.
We're going to see Wilka in 3 to 4 weeks. And we are very, very excited, and we're so happy to have you. It was so much fun. Thank you very much.